Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Brett Allen Smith here with ILTV's Morning Briefing. The world lost a truly one-of-a-kind leader over the weekend. John McCain, six-term Arizona state senator and revered war veteran, has just passed away just a few days shy of his 82nd birthday. Israeli leaders from across the spectrum have mourned McCain's death as a major loss for the world. Prime Minister Netanyahu published his condolences on Twitter, saying, quote, "The state of Israel salutes John McCain." The third generation in a long line of Navy men, McCain was a naval aviator during the Vietnam War. When his plane was shot down over the North Vietnam area in 1967, he was quickly captured by the Vietnamese and remained their prisoner of war for nearly 6 years. The years of physical and psychological torture he sustained during that time left quite a toll on his body, one that he would feel until his final days. But less than 10 years after being freed from his Vietnamese prison, McCain found himself entering politics. In 1982, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, followed by his election to the U.S. Senate in 1987, where he would continue to serve for the next 20-plus years in 6 consecutive terms. During that time, he maintained a largely conservative platform, and yet he also defined political bipartisanship and cooperation by being willing to go against his party, the Republican Party, when he felt it was right to do so. That reputation as a kind of maverick in the GOP was never more apparent than during the early days of the Trump campaign. McCain initially endorsed then-candidate Trump, a sort of maverick in his own right, only to publicly unendorse him following the leak of the infamous Access Hollywood tape. In that footage, originally filmed in 2005, Trump can be heard making inappropriate and offensive comments about women, comments which many felt were tantamount to admissions of sexual assault. Trump at one point refuted McCain's title as a war hero, saying at a public rally that, quote, "He is a war hero because he was captured. I like people who weren't captured," end quote. In the most public of their clashes, McCain famously gave the final decisive vote to strike down Trump's proposal to repeal and replace the Obamacare health plan, giving Trump one of his biggest legislative failures in his presidency. But in Israel, the legacy of John McCain is one of great support for Israeli interests, security, and friendship. Leaders from both the left and the right have praised McCain's fearlessness to vote with his heart and his mind over politics. After a long fight with brain cancer, John McCain's body is finally at rest, but his legacy will always live on. The U.S. State Department has just announced that it is cutting another $200 million of aid money to the Palestinians. This comes several months after the Trump administration slashed its original Palestinian budget to begin with, bringing the U.S.'s overall aid package down to an all-time low. U.S. officials confirmed in a statement that this money was originally intended for programs in the West Bank and Gaza, but that it will now be rerouted in accordance with U.S. national interests for projects with, quote, higher priority. This news has obviously been met with fierce outrage from the Palestinians, as well as human rights groups working to help get Gaza back on its feet. For them, this is a punitive punishment seemingly made in response to the Palestinians' rejection of Trump's still unseen terms for Israeli-Palestinian peace. Along those lines, we have just learned of another crucial detail of that said plan. The White House is apparently set to officially reject the Palestinians' so-called right of return. Now, much like the Jewish right of return, this summon is a mantra held by millions of Palestinians who were scattered all over the world following the creation of the State of Israel, when millions of Palestinians were expelled from the country. Generations later, the UN still holds those descendants in refugee status, along the basis that someday they should all have the right to immigrate back to their native lands. Israeli leaders have denounced this idea for a number of reasons. Namely, they see Israel as the original home state of the Jewish people. And furthermore, the absorption of millions of Palestinians would create an existential crisis by making Jews a minority in the country and no longer a Jewish majority state. Word is that the U.S. plan here is to defuse and slowly defund the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, and this is along the lines of what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has often called for. But given the millions of Palestinians still living in refugee camps all over the Middle East, including Syria, Lebanon, the West Bank, and Jordan, this remains a complex political and humanitarian issue. The head of the UNRWA has slammed Trump's policy shifts on the Palestinian issue, saying, quote, "One cannot simply wish 5 million people away," end quote. Trump said mere days ago that after moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, next it'll be the Palestinians' turn to receive something favorable that they want. But these budget cuts are likely not exactly what they were hoping for. A horrific incident has unfolded on what should have been a scenic beach day near the city of Haifa. A 23-year-old Jewish man allegedly approached a trio of beachgoers relaxing on the sand and asked them casually if they were Arab, to which the group replied yes. The man then left the scene and returned with 7 or 8 other men wielding knives, metal rods, and chains, and then proceeded to beat the beachgoers without warning in broad daylight. The 3 victims sustained gruesome injuries all over their bodies and may have been killed that moment if not for a few other bystanders who helped ward off the mob. The 3 victims were then rushed to the hospital in serious condition where they received immediate medical help. Obviously, the Arabic community, which makes up nearly a fifth minority of the State of Israel, sees this as nothing short of a hate crime, but many are also wondering why the State of Israel isn't acknowledging it as an attempted terror attack as well, considering that it was seemingly made on purely racial, nationalistic motives. One suspect in this crime has been arrested, but despite the horrific nature of the incident, and contrary to police recommendations to the court, the suspect has already been released to house arrest. Police say that they have 2 other suspects in mind, but a few days later, no word of arrest has yet been offered. Arab Knesset members have said that hate crimes like these are all but a guaranteed occurrence now, given the state's passage of the recent nation-state law. While proponents say that this law merely enshrines the nation's Jewish identity into its basic laws, critics say that it relegates minorities to second-class citizens with limited rights and lays down the groundwork for an apartheid state. The 3 victims happen to be a doctor and 2 nurses who serve in one of Haifa's largest public hospitals. So if you've ever spent time on an Israeli beach, you've probably noticed all the windsurfers out there on the horizon. Now when the season is just right, Mediterranean waters have the perfect combination of wind and waves for pure windsurfing bliss, which is why Israeli windsurfers are actually among the world's best, and that's a title that's just been secured with medal wins at the RSX European Windsurfing Championships in Poland. Yoav Omer and Shachar Tsuberi just snagged silver and bronze at this year's championship showdown, just narrowly missing out on the gold, which went to Italy. This really should have been Omer's year, by the way, considering that he won gold at the Youth Sailing World Championship in 2016. But for now, there's certainly nothing shameful about silver. And Tsuberi actually snagged a bronze medal when he competed on Israel's Olympic team in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Now in the women's category this year, Maya Morris and Noe Deran just barely missed out on medals by placing 4th and 5th in the women's windsurfing event. Now they may not be coming home with, gold, silver, or bronze, but with multiple Israelis in the top 10, clearly the country knows what it's doing, and needless to say, the surf is definitely up.
That's all for now. Follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Brett Allen Smith, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.